Want to totally crush it in your next meeting? Well, you're in the right place. Today, we're taking a deep dive into some awesome resources that can help you level up those meeting skills.
Yeah, from navigating those sometimes kind of tricky conversations to like really harnessing the power of grammar, we've got you covered.
We're looking at this super helpful English conversation guide that's packed with all sorts of useful phrases you can use right away.
And then we'll take a deep dive into this thing called the passive voice. It can be a bit of a mystery to some people.
It can be for sure, but we're going to demystify it today. So we've got conversation skills and grammar on the agenda for this deep dive. Sounds like a powerful combo.
It really is. Having the right phrases at your fingertips and really understanding how language works can make you a total communication rock star.
Totally. So let's jump right in with this English conversation guide. What was it about this resource that really stood out to you when you first looked at it?
You know, it was the way these phrases are put together. They manage to be both clear and diplomatic at the same time.
I see what you mean.
Like, they're designed to help you smoothly handle those potentially awkward moments that sometimes pop up in meetings.
Oh, yeah, like confirming all the details or dealing with last-minute changes or having to address concerns that somebody might bring up, stuff like that.
Exactly. Those situations where you need to you need to get your point across, but also keep things professional and, keep everyone on the same page.
Absolutely. I'm looking at some of these phrases now, and here's a good one. It says, the meeting was canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. Okay, that's way more professional than just blurting out, something came up. Why do you think that is?
It's all about being neutral and avoiding blame. When you say unforeseen circumstances, it kind of suggests that it was, like, beyond anyone's control,
Right. It's not pointing fingers at anyone.
Which can definitely help diffuse tension, I'd say, and also prevent people from, from speculating or maybe even gossiping about why the meeting was canceled.
It's about keeping things focused and professional no matter what's going on behind the scenes.
It's interesting. I'm noticing that a lot of these phrases actually use the passive voice. I mean, the meeting was canceled, not, someone canceled the meeting.
That's a really sharp observation. The passive voice can be, it can be your secret weapon in meetings.
Your secret weapon. I like that.
Yeah, because it lets you shift the focus away from like specific people and onto the actions or decisions that were made.
So as an example, let's say John made the decision to postpone the project versus the decision was made to postpone the project.
Perfect example.
That second one just sounds, I don't know, less personal somehow. Like it takes the emotion out of it.
Exactly. And that can be really helpful, especially when, when you're dealing with sensitive topics or you want to avoid placing blame on anyone in particular. It's a very diplomatic way to handle things.
This is making me think about the passive voice in a whole new light. It's not just about sounding formal or whatever. It's like, it's a strategic tool.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a tool you can use to sound more authoritative, highlight accomplishments, or even, subtly deflect blame if you need to.
Whoa, okay. I'm kind of intrigued now. Let's get a little more into the nitty-gritty of how the passive voice actually works. It involves some rearranging of the grammar, right?
Yeah, but it's not as complicated as it might seem at first.
Okay, good.
Think of it this way. In a regular sentence, what we call an active sentence, the subject is the one doing the action, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But in a passive sentence, the subject is actually the one receiving the action.
Okay, so give me an example. I need to hear this in action.
All right, so let's say the team completed the project. Team is the subject, and they're actively doing the verb completed.
Got it.
Now, to make that passive, we'd say the project was completed by the team. Now, project has become the subject, and it's passively receiving the action of being completed.
It's like we flipped the script. The focus is now on the project itself, not the team that did it.
That's it. And sometimes that little shift in emphasis can make a huge difference in how your message is received. Especially, like I was saying, in meetings where there are a lot of different opinions and personalities flying around.
I can see that. But there's got to be more to it than just flipping this subject and verb. I mean, I'm remembering that our source material talked about different tenses and potential pitfalls to watch out for.
Oh, for sure. There are definitely some nuances to keep in mind. You're right. It's not just about flipping things around.
So what are some of those things, those extra details we should be aware of?
Well, for example, one common mistake is using the wrong tense of the verb to be. Like sometimes people might say, the report submitted yesterday instead of the report was submitted yesterday. We've got to have that was in there.
Ah, the little things matter.
They do. And another thing people sometimes forget is the past participle of the main verb. So instead of saying the email sent, it should be the email was sent.
Okay, so it's all about being precise with those little grammatical details. Otherwise, our passive voice might end up sounding a bit wonky. But we're not just trying to avoid mistakes, right? It's also about using this tool strategically. Knowing when to use the passive voice is key.
Exactly. And that's something our when to use section highlights really well, I think.
Fill us in.
For example, let's say there's a mistake that needs to be addressed, but you don't want to single anyone out. Instead of saying, someone forgot to order the supplies, you could say, the supplies were not ordered.
Ooh, that's clever.
Right. It acknowledges the issue but doesn't lay blame, and it keeps everyone focused on finding a solution.
It's all about that professional vibe,
Yeah.
Finding those workarounds so you can keep things moving smoothly.
Absolutely. And that's where the passive voice can really shine.
This is really making me rethink how I approach, well, all sorts of interactions, not just meetings. It's like I've got this whole new set of tools to navigate those tricky situations. But before we go too deep into grammar land, I want to circle back to those conversation phrases from the guide for a minute.
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
There are some real gems in there. I'm thinking our listeners could start using these right away and see some immediate results.
Totally agree. Those phrases are they're like little communication hacks almost. Those shortcuts that can instantly boost your confidence and make you sound more in control, even when things get a little heated.
Exactly. And I think it'd be super helpful to break down a few of those phrases and really analyze why they work so well. It's not just about memorizing a script, it's about understanding the principles behind them.
You're so right. So why don't we pick a few phrases that really highlight those subtle communication strategies that can, seriously elevate your game in meetings?
Okay, I have one in mind already. It's pretty simple, but I think it packs a punch. Here it is. Let's ensure we stay on schedule. I mean, it's a classic way to bring a meeting back on track when things start veering off course, but why does it work so well?
Well, I think it's that kind of gentle but firm approach, It's not confrontational at all. It doesn't put anyone on the spot.
But it gets the message across.
Yeah. It sends a clear signal that staying focused is important, that, time is valuable. And it also subtly suggests that everyone shares responsibility for keeping the meeting on track,
Yeah, it subtly shifts the responsibility, I'd say, from one person to the whole group. It's like you're saying, hey, we're all in this together, so let's be mindful of the time.
Right. And that's so much more diplomatic, wouldn't you say, than, interrupting someone and saying, hey, we're getting off topic.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Way less likely to put someone on the defensive.
I'm also noticing that a lot of these effective phrases, they tend to focus more on actions and outcomes rather than calling out specific individuals. You're right. And that kind of brings us back to the power of the passive voice, doesn't it?
It does.
Instead of saying, you haven't finished the report yet, you could say something like, has the report been finalized?
Ah, there it is again. The passive voice.
Yep. It shifts the focus to the task itself, not the person who may or may not have completed it.
It removes that blame element and keeps the whole conversation much more professional.
It's more like, let's work together to get this done,
Yeah.
rather than, you messed up.
I'm starting to see how these seemingly simple conversation tips are actually pretty sophisticated when you really think about the psychology behind them. This is fascinating stuff.
It is, isn't it? Language is a powerful tool, and these phrases, they really show how we can use it to navigate those those sometimes complex social situations that come up in meetings.
Okay, I'm ready to put on my communication detective hat again.
All right, what have you got?
How about this one? I understand your concerns, but I believe this is the best course of action. It's that classic way to acknowledge someone's viewpoint, but still, stand your ground.
It's a good one. And it's effective because, well, it combines empathy with confidence.
Ah, I see what you mean.
You start by showing that you get where the other person is coming from, which helps build that connection and rapport.
Right.
And then you confidently lay out your own perspective.
Yeah.
But you're not dismissing their concerns. You're just saying, hey, here's my take on it.
So it's I hear you, but I've also thought this through really carefully, and here's why I think this is the way to go.
Exactly. It's that delicate balance, acknowledging their feelings, but also advocating for your own position. That's such a valuable skill no matter what kind of meeting you're in.
What's interesting is that this phrase, it doesn't actually use the passive voice, so it's not like that's the only key to effective communication, right?
You're absolutely right. Active voice definitely has its place too. It's more direct, and a lot of times it just sounds more, well, more natural in everyday conversations.
I could see that.
But when you need that extra layer of diplomacy or formality,
Uh-huh.
or when you really want to emphasize the action itself, that's when the passive voice can be really, really powerful.
It's like having different tools in your communication toolbox. You got to choose the right one for the job.
Exactly. And the more you practice with these different tools, well, the more skilled you'll become at using them effectively. But remember, it's not just about the tools themselves. It's about understanding those underlying principles of communication.
That's such a good point. It's not just about memorizing a bunch of phrases or grammar rules. It's about really understanding how language works and how you can use it to achieve your goals in any interaction, really.
That's the key takeaway here. We're talking about empowering yourself to become a more confident and effective communicator.
Hmm.
Whether you're leading a meeting, presenting a new idea, or even just having a conversation with a colleague.
All right, this has been super insightful, but before we go any further, I think it'd be really helpful to ground all of this with a real world example. Like maybe analyze a short clip from a meeting transcript, so we can see these principles in action.
Oh, I love that idea. Let's put our communication detective skills to the test.
Perfect. Okay, here's the scenario. A team is discussing a project that's hit a few snags, and one team member, kind of out of frustration, blurts out, "We're never going to meet this deadline. Everything is going wrong." Now, obviously, that's expressing how they're feeling, but it's not exactly constructive, right?
Not really, no.
How could we rephrase that, using what we've been talking about?
Well, instead of focusing on the negative and making it personal, we could try shifting the focus to the actual challenges, and then try to find solutions. So they could say something like, "It looks like the project is facing some unexpected delays.
Hmm.
Let's talk about possible solutions and see if we need to adjust the timeline."
Oh, that's so much better. It acknowledges the problem, but it doesn't get bogged down in negativity. And it immediately gets everyone focused on problem-solving mode.
Exactly. And notice how it uses the passive voice to mention the delays without pointing fingers at anyone. That's a subtle but really important way to keep the atmosphere positive and collaborative.
This is really making me realize that mastering communication, it's kind of like mastering any other skill. It takes practice, it takes paying attention to the details, but the payoff is huge. You can really shift the whole energy of a room just by choosing your words carefully.
That's such a great way to put it. It's not just about the words themselves, it's the intention behind them. And when you approach communication with intention and awareness, you can achieve some pretty amazing things.
I'm so glad we did this deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much already, but we've covered a lot, and I want to make sure that everyone listening is walking away with the key takeaways.
Good idea. Let's do a quick recap of those essential insights that can turn anyone into a meeting maestro.
Sounds good. First things first. We explored those super handy conversation phrases from the English Conversation Guide. These phrases are they're like little communication life rafts. They can help you gracefully navigate all those different situations that pop up in meetings, and they can make you sound more confident right away.
And remember, it's not just about memorizing the phrases themselves. It's about understanding why they work, those subtle strategies they're using.
Exactly. We also took a deep dive into the often misunderstood passive voice, which, it turns out, can be incredibly helpful in meetings, right?
Totally. It lets you shift the focus away from specific people and onto the actions themselves, or the decisions that were made.
And that creates a more objective, more diplomatic tone, which can be super helpful, especially in tricky situations.
And throughout our conversation, we emphasized, how important it is to be mindful of those subtle ways that our words can impact others. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
We encouraged our listeners to really think about the intention behind their words and to use language strategically to achieve their communication goals, whatever those might be. Because at the end of the day, effective communication is all about connecting with others, building strong relationships, and creating that positive and productive environment where everyone feels heard and respected.
Perfectly summarized.
But before we wrap up this segment, I have one more question for you. We've talked a lot about how to use these communication techniques, but what about the benefits? What can our listeners really expect to gain by putting all of this into practice?
Ooh, good question. The benefits are huge. For starters, you can expect to feel so much more confident going into any meeting.
That alone is a game changer. I know how intimidating those meetings can be, especially if you're feeling unprepared or unsure of how to handle those tricky personalities that sometimes clash.
Right. But when you've got these tools and techniques in your back pocket, you can walk into any meeting with a sense of, calm and composure. You'll be able to express your ideas more clearly and confidently. You'll be able to handle those challenging situations with grace, and you'll start to build even stronger relationships with your colleagues.
It's like you're taking control of your own communication destiny. We're not just at the mercy of those awkward silences or, those heated debates anymore. You actually have the power to shape the conversation and steer it in a positive direction.
Love that. And as you get more comfortable using these skills, you'll find it's easier to achieve your goals, whether it's getting a project approved, resolving a conflict, or just, making a good impression on your team.
It's making me realize that mastering communication, it's not just a nice-to-have skill. It's essential for success in any field, really. It's about building trust, fostering collaboration, and, just creating a work environment where everyone feels good about showing up.
Couldn't agree more.
This has been such a fantastic conversation. I'm so glad we did this. But before we send everyone off into that sometimes chaotic world of meetings, I think we need to take this one step further. We need to put this knowledge into practice with a real-life case study.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So for the final segment, we're going to dissect an actual meeting transcript.
Ooh, this is exciting.
I know, right? We'll look for those key moments where, those conversation skills and that grammar mastery we've been talking about can really make a difference. We'll analyze the language, suggest some alternative phrasing, and we'll basically show how even small tweaks can have a big impact on the outcome of a meeting.
I can't wait. It's going to be fascinating to see how these principles work in a real-world setting.
I know. All right, dear listener, grab your notepads, get ready to analyze, and get ready for the grand finale of our Meeting Mastery Deep Dive. Welcome back to the final part of our Meeting Mastery Deep Dive. Now it's time to put all this knowledge into practice. Are you ready to see this stuff in action?
I'm super excited to really see how these principles play out in a real meeting. It's one thing to talk about them, but seeing them in action, that's where the magic happens.
Exactly. So for this segment, we've pulled an excerpt from a real-life meeting transcript.
Oh, cool.
We've highlighted a few key moments where, those conversation skills and grammar techniques we've been discussing could really make a difference.
Let's get to it.
Okay, here's the first one. Imagine a team brainstorming ideas for a new marketing campaign, and one person says, I think we should just do what we did last year. It worked fine.
Yeah. I see where this is going.
On the surface, it just sounds like a suggestion, right? But it could actually shut down creativity and prevent the team from exploring new ideas.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's good to, acknowledge past successes and all that, but if you just keep relying on the same old strategies, you're not going to grow,
Yeah.
You got to keep things fresh.
So how could that person rephrase their comment to make it more open to new ideas?
Instead of just saying, let's stick with what we did last year, they could say something like, last year's campaign was definitely successful, but, maybe we should also think about some new approaches so we can make sure we're, constantly evolving and reaching new people.
That's good. It acknowledges that the past approach worked, but it also emphasizes, the need for innovation.
Yeah, it opens up the conversation so that other people feel comfortable, sharing their ideas without feeling like they're dissing the work that was already done.
Okay, let's move on to the next excerpt. This one involves a team member who's presenting a proposal, and they start by saying, I'm not sure if this is a good idea, but yikes.
Ooh, yeah, not a great start.
I mean, if you're already expressing self-doubt, it's going to be tough to get anyone else on board with your idea.
Exactly. It's like that lack of confidence just kind of spreads,
So how can we rephrase that opening so it sounds more, confident and persuasive?
Instead of saying, I'm not sure if this is a good idea, but this is, they could try something like, hey, I'd like to present a proposal that I think could really benefit the team. I think it has a lot of potential.
Ooh, I like that. It immediately shifts the focus to the positive, to the potential benefits instead of lingering on that doubt.
It's like you're leading with your strengths.
And
it uses the active voice to show that, you believe in this idea. You own it.
Okay, we've got time for one more excerpt. Let's imagine a team leader wrapping up a meeting and saying, okay, I think that's everything. Any questions?
It's like pretty standard way to end a meeting, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't exactly leave everyone feeling super energized or, create a strong sense of accountability.
It's kind of vague, right? Like, what happens next?
Exactly. So how can we rephrase that closing to make it more impactful and make sure everyone knows what they need to do next?
Instead of that open-ended, any questions, uh, the leader could say something like, okay, just to sum up, here are the action steps we've agreed on, and then actually list out, who's doing what, and then finish with, let me know if anything needs clarifying, but I'm feeling good about this. I know we can make this happen.
Oh, I love that. It's clear, it's concise, it's motivating.
It also kind of subtly uses that passive voice we were talking about earlier. We've agreed, implies that everyone's on board and shares the responsibility.
This has been such a cool exercise. I mean, it's amazing to see how, these little changes in phrasing, they can have such a big impact on how clearly and confidently we communicate.
It's all about being aware of those nuances and using language in a way that helps us reach our goals. It's a skill, and like any skill, it takes practice.
Yeah.
But it's so worth it.
The more we practice these things, the more natural they'll become when we're, in the thick of it in those meetings.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to handle those situations like pros.
Exactly.
Well, dear listener, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into meeting mastery. We hope you've enjoyed this journey as much as we have.
We've explored some practical tools, we've uncovered the secrets of the passive voice, and we've even put our knowledge to the test with some real-world examples.
We hope you're feeling inspired and empowered to, rock your next meeting.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about, being mindful of how you communicate and just, striving to be clear, confident, and respectful in all those interactions.
So well said. And on that note, we'll say goodbye for now. Until next time, dear listener, keep those communication skills sharp.